RBI signs off financial year 23 with a 25 basis rate hike, the US economy conundrum, and the road ahead for Vodafone Idea after government's White Knight Act. This is Business Plus, your definitive edge to business and economy. The Reserve Bank of India today, in line with expectations, hiked the repo rate by 25 basis points to 6.5%, thus slowing the pace of rate hike from 35 basis points in December of last year. Now, the reverse repo rate, however, has been kept unchanged at 3.35%. The standing deposit facility rate will now stand revised to 6.25% and the marginal standing facility rate and the bank rate to 6.75%. What's more, the central bank also retained its stance of withdrawing accommodation that it adopted early last year. What this means is that more rate hikes could be in the offing, albeit largely dependent on the inflation trajectory in the country. Remember, the RBI has been continuously raising the repo rate since May of 2020. In the last 3 quarters itself, the repo rate has gone up by 2.5%, although it should be noted that the RBI has not been aggressive in its fight against inflation as the US Feds, which has bumped up interest rate by 3.75% from 1% in May last year to 4.75% as of February. Talking about inflation, the RBI has also cut its retail inflation target for the fiscal to 6.5%, perhaps indicating that the worst of price pressures is behind us. RBI Governor Shaktikanta Das expects inflation to cool off in financial year 2024 to 5.3%, dropping well below RBI's tolerance of 6%. Das, however, flagged core inflation, which excludes food and energy prices, as a potential pain point. Softening food inflation on the back of a sharp decline in vegetable prices has majorly contributed to inflation cooling off in recent months. As a result of this, inflation in the third quarter of financial year 2023 has turned out to be lower than RBI's earlier projections. Now, RBI has also released its GDP projections for this fiscal as well as the next. The central bank expects real GDP to grow at 6.4% in financial year 2024 and 7% in financial year 2023. What's more, the GDP growth for first quarter of financial year has been projected at 7.8%, for Q2 at 6.2%, for third quarter at 6% and for fourth quarter at 5.8%. Das said that the economic outlook is not as grim as it was just about a few months ago. Following the policy decision, the bond prices fell, with the yield on 10-year benchmark bonds rising by as much as 6 basis points to 7.36%. The rupee, however, rose against the dollar and stocks held gains. And shifting focus now, the US economy seems to be going through a curious period, leaving everybody, investors, economists, consumers, and what have you, completely confused. Consider this. Yesterday, Zoom Video Communications cut 15% of its workforce, or about 1,300 jobs. Not just that, Zoom CEO announced a 98% personal salary cut, along with foregoing the corporate bonus for the coming year. With layoffs happening in big tech across the industry, Alphabet, Amazon, Microsoft, to name just a few, one would be tempted into believing that things are bad, real bad, with the US economy. Now consider this. US financial markets got off to a rip-roaring start in 2023. Equities, bonds, and even Bitcoin rallied in January. Emerging markets shunned during the pandemic also saw big inflows. The risk-on appetite hinged on expectation for a quote-unquote soft landing in the US. Simply put, speedy fall in inflation without a recession. Now, that would point towards things being good, but then investors were brought back down to earth last Friday as the US reported strong job numbers, which raises the prospect that inflation could be stickier than expected, and the federal government pushed interest rates higher for longer. What seems clear now is that until a clear narrative on how the economy will fare emerges, markets will continue to be volatile. Right now, the pieces of puzzles aren't really fitting well together. The GDP is up despite manufacturing sector going into a recession. Yet, employment rates remain elevated even as big tech layoffs employing hundreds and thousands of people are continuing with their layoffs. For some, the soft landing narratives remain intact. Sturdy job numbers alongside a slowdown in annual earnings growth suggests disinflation could be achieved without a notable uptick in unemployment. But inflation is still out of control despite interest rates continuing to rise very steeply. There is also discomfort that bumper job growth and resilience in the service sector will continue. So instead of a soft landing, this could point to a no landing scenario where the US economy does not slow and inflation and interest rates reach new heights. Confused enough? Well, tell me about it. And in news from telecom sector, all eyes are now on promoters of beleaguered Vodafone Idea after the government stepped in as the White Knight, with the government picking up nearly 34% stake after converting its interest on the loss-making teleco dues into equity. The government is expecting a double down on fundraising efforts so that it can compete with Reliance Jio and Bharti Airtel. Telecom Secretary K. Rajaraman said that substantial discussions have been carried out with the Vodafone Idea promoters on fundraising, and the government expects them to take necessary steps to improve teleco's prospects. Now, post allotment of shares to the government, Vodafone will own 31.7% stake, while Aditya Birla Group will own 18.2% stake. Vodafone Idea, which has been losing subscribers at a fast clip and was facing an uncertain future prior to government's intervention, will now have to step up on its 5G rollout plans. And the government has made it clear that the rollout needs to happen in the stipulated time to meet license obligations. The debt-ridden teleco has not been able to launch 5G services despite Jio and Airtel expanding the next generation technology-backed network since August last year. Vodafone Idea's existence is essential as its collapse will mean that the Indian telecom sector will become a duopoly, and that is the prime reason behind government stepping in. With even market leaders like Reliance Jio struggling with average revenue per user growth for the past few quarters, the road ahead for Vodafone Idea will be an arduous one despite the recent lifelines. Shifting focus, for those who are struggling with payments and money exchange when traveling abroad, there is good news. You can now pay money using Unified Payment Interface (UPI) internationally. PhonePe has launched a feature which will allow users to make direct payments from their Indian bank accounts when they are traveling abroad. Now, PhonePe launched the UPI International feature that will support merchants' outlets in UAE, Singapore, Mauritius, Nepal and Bhutan, those who have a local QR or quick response code. Indian travelers will be able to make direct payments in foreign currency from their Indian banks, similar to international debit cards. Walmart-backed PhonePe says it is the first Indian fintech app to launch this service in collaboration with the National Payments Corporation, India's international subsidiary. Now, PhonePe, which recently raised about $350 million in funding as a part of its $1 billion fundraising plan, is now India's largest UPI app by market size. Data says that PhonePe processed more than 360 crore transactions worth nearly 6.5 lakh crore rupees in December of 2022. The figures account for almost half of all the UPI transaction and half of the total transaction in value in the entire country in that month. Now, compared to Google Pay, which handled just about 34% or over 270 crore rupees of total UPI transaction count in that month, which is around 4.5 lakh crore rupees. Former UPI market leader Paytm too is showing signs of recovery. Analysts at Macquarie Research have given a double upgrade to 197 Communications, the company that runs Paytm. This after the fintech major reported operating profitability in the December quarter. Paytm reported revenue growth of 41% to 2,000 crore rupee in December quarter, while net losses narrowed to less than 400 crore rupees. Riding the bullish sentiment, Paytm shares hit the upper circuit on 7th of February. And with that, it's a wrap on this edition of Business Plus. For more incisive news analysis and cutting-edge documentaries, keep streaming News 9 Plus. Thanks for watching.